Well, on behalf of the Kilkee and West Clare Heritage and History Group and the Quern Community Development Group, we'd like to thank you all for coming tonight to hear the story and the plans for Johnnie Mack's house. We've got John O'Malley here who's going to introduce our speaker, and I'll hand everything over to him.
Thanks, Robert. We better sit down here as well, I suppose. So great to meet you. Great to see such a crowd out for. Obviously, there's great interest in this. I suppose it came to our attention. It came to our attention that
that's not a loudspeaker. Okay. That's just for the people on the remote.
Fair enough. It came to our attention, the council, the last number of years, the safety of the junction. You know, and I know people living locally would have been dealing with it for years. So it kind of came into us, and we were looking for a way of actually funding how we could improve the safety of the junction, knowing how dangerous it was. So we got funding last year under a low-cost safety scheme. Unfortunately, the house is right on the junction, as you know, so that blocks the view and makes it very dangerous. I suppose an example of that was only the last week or so, there was a very bad accident there. I think it was a lady or two had to be airlifted from the location, so it kind of highlights the risk that was there. So I suppose in going about planning the works, what came from that was the local interest in relation to the history of the house, and through that we became more aware of it, and we kind of put a pause to the start of the works. I know we were anxious to kind of get the work done, but we also wanted to kind of preserve the heritage of what was there in a unique location. And the more it was highlighted to me, the more I said, you know, we need to pause this and see, is there something we can do here, and is there a way we can do it? So I would have been dealing with Congela from inside in the council with me. She's our heritage officer, and Paddy got involved as well. So a lot of information was fed through to me, and there was that report done in recent times as well. So from that, we paused it and we looked at what could be done. So that's where we are with it in the council at the moment. We've paused the works, but the works will be done this year as regards the road safety. So the sooner we have the surveys done and we decide what we can do with the house, we will get the road safety element of it carried out. So that will be done this year. We have to kind of do it this year from a funding perspective, or we'll lose the money. And we just want to do it for a safety perspective anyway. But we also want to preserve as much as possible of the house, or in whatever way we can, but at least to capture what is there. But we might be able to retain a section of the house and still be able to get the site distance in. So I'll pass you over to Paddy, who will give you more of the story behind the house itself.
Thank you, John. Give me 1 second to get set up here. That'll have to do. I put a few notes and thoughts together, which you can hopefully see there over my head. If you want to look back at my notes afterwards, you can go to my website, pwaldron.info/Tullaroe, all lowercase. That might be the only note you need or photo of the screen you need to take. And there's 14 people watching us live on YouTube as well, to whom I'd like to extend a warm welcome. So by way of introduction, can you read that down the back, or do you want me to blow up the text size? Okay. Johnnie Mack, I'll show you his picture in a moment. I might as well show it to you straight away. There's the house as it was in 2001, photographed by Sonia Shorman. That's the photo that's been used in all the publicity when it was for sale in 2001. That is the inside, the old open hearth. That's Johnnie Mack's great niece, Nancy, from Chicago, who visited him in 1978 and took all these great photographs. That's her feeding her 2-year-old child a drink out of what I think is a Kilrush ceramics cup. I think I recognize the pattern. You can see that's the house of a bachelor farmer that mightn't have been the cleanest in the world. There's Johnnie himself standing in front of the fire with his great niece and his great nephew. And there's Johnnie by the fireplace. You can see the lovely little cubby hole for the clock and the original crane and tongs. So the inside of this house hadn't changed for the best part of 100 years when Johnnie died in 1981. There's Johnny outside with the two visitors from America. And there's a view from across the other corner of the cross. And we can't see any windows in that side of the house. And I always thought that's very strange. There are no windows in that side of the house. But given what's now been uncovered, I think there might be windows concealed behind the foliage. So that is the end of the slideshow. And we will go back. Johnny was the last survivor of a family of 7 McNamaras. That house was one of the last inhabited, at least partly mud-built houses in County Clare. It fell into disrepair when Johnny died. He lived alone after his last sister died in 1955. It's now at a critical crossroads, both literally and metaphorically. Thank you to Congela and Robbie and other local historians for putting this evening together. And I think we're talking about the trade-off here between road safety and our vernacular architecture. Some people have compared the house in Tullaroe to Blake's Cross, where vernacular architecture possibly has won out over road safety. So you've heard from Robbie, you've heard from John. After me, we'll have Dave Pollock, hopefully joining us live from Waterford over YouTube. And John O'Brien from Dúchas na Sionna is here as well to say a few words at the end. So let me look at some old maps. Tullaroe, or at least part of it, was known as Farmhouse. On Clare Library, we have maps dating from 1659 up to the present day. This is the 1659 map. The thick black line is the boundary between Moyarta Parish and Kilfeera Parish, or Carrigaholt and Kilkee parishes in modern day terminology. Here you see the cross for the Kilfeera church. That's the church that was still used as by the established church until the early 1840s, when the church on the Carrigaholt Road took its place, where the graveyard is today. Down in this corner is Kilnagalloch, another of the oldest churches in the vicinity. And we can go through the different main maps of Clare. That was 1659. 1663 is not very different. Again, you see Kilfeera Church and Kilnagalloch. There are no roads on these maps. Whether they were there or not, I'm not sure. The next map is Pelham's Grand Jury map of 1787. And as far as I know, all this shaded area denotes the bog. Much of Tullaroe was bogland. You can just about see Farnvollen behind the bog. You can see the road at least going as far as Kilfeera Church, and the road from Dunaha past Perrin Cross out towards Camogue, where the ferry went across to bring people into Kilrush. So even in 1787, there's very little going on in Tullaroe. 1842, then we have the Ordnance Survey maps. There's 2 versions. I should have gone to the overview version first because it's a little clearer. Now we have a long straight road going from Kilfeera down past St. Martin's Well and curving down here to the ferry at Camogue with a turn off for Kilnagalloch. Well, the interesting thing about this map, here's Johnnie Mack's cross in Tullaroe. It's not a 4 crossroads, it's just a T-junction. In 1840, there was no road heading north from Johnnie Mack's up towards Tarman School and over towards Blackweir Bridge. Blackweir Bridge was relatively new. It was only built, I think, in the late 1700s. So there wouldn't have been any traffic coming this way, north-south. The traffic would all have been going east-west in Tullaroe. And now, of course, this north-south road, which didn't exist in the 1840s, is the Wild Atlantic Way. Johnnie Mack's house stands right on the Wild Atlantic Way. And if we go to the other one and I try to zoom in, we can actually see the buildings, if and when that comes into focus. And you can see there a tiny little black dot just where my cursor is, where the house is today. And there were 3 or 4 other houses gathered around what was then a T-junction, and plenty of other houses along the Tullaroe Road going back into Kilkee. So the question is, when was the present house built? It was clearly there in 1840 when the Ordnance Survey map was drawn, or there was a structure on the site. As Dave will show us later, it is partly a mud house with an extension built more of stone than mud. So my suspicion is the mud part is what you're seeing on that 1840 map. The next map is from sometime after Griffith's valuation in 1855. This is the same map we saw a minute ago, and now we have the various farm boundaries drawn in and numbered. In this case, Johnnie Mack's grandfather, his maternal grandfather, John Behan, occupied number 15 on this map and number 36A on this map. But his house was in number 15. It was on the northeast corner of the crossroads. The house on the southeast corner, it was not occupied in 1855 at no rateable annual valuation. So I'll come back, I'll go back to my notes now, having shown you the maps, and tell you a little bit about the people who lived in Tullaroe. We can see the names of the occupiers in 1827 in the Tithe Allotment book and in 1855 in Griffith's valuation. And Behan was a surname that appeared between 1827 and 1855. Further down the list, so was McNamara, but two of the surnames which disappeared were Carmody and Ayres. And my understanding from looking at the records is that a McNamara married into a Carmody farm and a Behan married into an Ayres farm sometime between 1827 and 1855. The landlords in Tullaroe were the Burrow family, an uncle and a nephew, both called Randall Burrow, one of them with a descendant sitting here beside me, and another one down here. There's Randall. The present Randall is hiding somewhere down there on the left-hand side. The John McNamara, who we find in 1855, is actually just a coincidence. He had the land on the southwest corner of the crossroads. And we know in 1858, there's a baptism record for a McNamara Carmody child. John Behan, the reason he had two holdings is his land was held under the two different branches of the Burrow family. On the northeast corner, the nephew was his landlord. On the southeast corner, where the mud house is today, the uncle was his landlord. And we know John Behan married Bridget Ayres because their daughter is recorded in the baptismal registers in Carrigaholt in 1858. She was the youngest of a large family. The earlier baptismal registers don't survive, so we don't have baptism dates for the older children. One of the older children, Catherine, went to Crawford County in Iowa, not the biggest metropolis in North America, not somewhere I've ever been. Has anyone here ever been to Crawford County, Iowa? One person? Who's the American in the room? That was the go-to destination for people from Kilkee and Carrigaholt areas for much of the 1800s. And probably before they started going to Newtown, Connecticut and other places we associate with our emigration. But I have a death record for Mrs. Catherine Walsh with parents John Behan and Ayres. Her grief-stricken relatives who'd never met their Irish grandmother didn't know the grandmother's first name, but did know her maiden surname when they registered her death. So I know May Morrissey, May Talty, used to tell me that in her young days, they called the crossroads, which we now call Johnnie Mack's Cross, they called it Behan's Cross. And I'm pretty sure that back in the 1820s and 1830s, it was Ayres Cross. I have copied the records from the valuation office, which is the update of the 1855 Griffith's valuation, which lists the rated occupiers of every farm in the country. It was a bit messy because, as you saw, the Burrow estate was in Chancery. We'd call that maybe in Nama or something today. So there was lots of redrawing of farm boundaries, renumbering, consolidation of holdings, etc. But I think I figured out what happened. The McNamaras, who were originally there on the southwest corner, we call that Liam Sullivan's corner maybe today. John died in 1874. His wife Bridget disappeared in 1891, and John Behan Jr. took over in that corner. John Behan Sr. had died in 1881. He had acquired additional land after 1855, and that was taken over by his son, John Jr. But Patrick McNamara, no relation to the Macks across the road, my great-grandfather's brother, came from Craganock up near Mullock, and he took over. He married Bridget Behan. I can't find a precise date for the marriage. There's probably a date in the church records. They were not good at registering births, marriages, or deaths with the civil authorities. But Patrick moved in, and sometime around 1894 or 1895, it appears that they moved across the road from the northeast corner to the southeast corner where the mud house is today. And the rateable annual valuation was £1 per year, which was quite a bit more than a lot of the neighbouring houses. So the stone addition on the end of the house probably contributed to that addition, and maybe there were a good number of outhouses. John Behan Jr. and his brother-in-law Patrick McNamara for a number of years seemed to be farming on the two corners opposite each other. But by the 1901 census, John Behan had sold his, or I'd say sold his land. Those days, people were tenants rather than owners of their lands. The O'Donnells, the ancestors of the Sullivans, had taken over. And in the 1901 census, we find the Behans and the McNamaras all living in a single house. Here's the list of occupiers in 1901. House 18 in Tullaroe, we have the Behans and McNamaras living together. There's a second McNamara house in number 35 that later became Halpin's. The two Patrick McNamaras came from up the country, we'll say, and married into farms in Tullaroe, one in 1865 and one around 1881, I think. And usually in Ireland, we had the tradition, if you have two neighbours called Patrick McNamara, well, you give them a patronymic. We had two Michael McNamaras in Moveen, and we could call them Michael Anthony and Michael Patrick. But in this case, the neighbours didn't know the father's names of the two Patrick McNamaras who come from 15 miles away. So if we look at the census return in 1911, which something is wrong with, but we can eventually open it, it's very interesting to see how the census enumerator distinguished between the two McNamaras. You probably can't read the handwriting. In number 28, we have Pat McNamara O'Shaughnessy. He married an O'Shaughnessy. That was the only way to distinguish him from, I can't even read the small print. The second one from the top, Pat McNamara Behan, who married the Behan. So that's a unique aspect of nomenclature when there's scope for confusion in rural Ireland. Both of those Patrick McNamaras, just to confuse us even further, died in 1933 within less than a year of each other. And there were no relation to the Macks who lived there before. So who was living in this three-room, part mud, part stone house in 1901? The entire McNamara family. Patrick, who'd come down from Craganock, Bridget, his wife, the Behan, into whose house he had married, their twins, Mary Ann and Eliza, their 5 younger children, and Bridget's 2 siblings, John and Eliza. And I know, again, from talking to May Morrissey many years ago, the highlight of her walk home from Tarman School to Talty's house in Rahanishka was stopping at the sweet shop which Eliza Behan ran on the northeast corner across from the mud house. In 1911, there's very little change. It's still a 3-room house. There's now only 9 people living in it. The McNamara parents, their 5 children, the 2 in-laws, but 2 of the children, Mary Ann and Michael, have gone to America. They're both living in Chicago by 1911. They're both married with their own families, and there's a lot of descendants out there today. So I can say a little bit more about the diaspora. We have a monument in Camogue to those who drowned during the famine in 1849 when the ferry crossing from the west to Kilrush to the workhouse sank. And 2 of the names in that monument are Richard Ayres and Jane Ayres. They're probably relatives of the Ayres who lived in at Johnnie Mack's Cross in Tullaroe. There's a Lawrence Ayres who later lived in Clare, may have been a son of the Ayres who lived there in 1827, and another Thomas who lived in Tullaroe in 1868. We know a lot more about the Behan family. There may be descendants of the Behans in the room here tonight. These are roughly in order of age based on when they married, when they had children. As I said, we've no baptism records going back before the mid-1850s. Probably the oldest girl was Mary, who married a McGrath in 1862. We know from the marriage record she was from Tullaroe. There was only one Behan in Tullaroe in 1862. She registered her father's death, the one record that was registered. She didn't actually say Mary McGrath, daughter, but I'm pretty sure she was his daughter. She had a daughter, Bridget, who married at Clohessy, and there's a large dynasty of descendants of theirs living around Querrin and further afield today. You already saw Catherine went to Iowa. Michael might have been the intended heir. He never shows up in the land records as living in Tullaroe, but we have his marriage in 1871, a church record only, to Mary Scanlon. And we know they had 3 children who were born in Tullaroe. And where did they end up? Crawford County, Iowa. Mary died. Michael has disappeared. I don't know whether he died at home and wasn't registered or went to Iowa with his children. Margaret married a Keane in Shangana. They still have descendants in America. I'm not sure are there any descendants around in Clare today. Patrick Behan went to Crawford County, Iowa. Where else? And has many descendants still living there. Bridget was the woman who married Patrick McNamara from Craganock. She died in 1916, and the 2 unmarried siblings who stayed at home died in 1919 and 1937. There were 7 McNamara children, as we saw on the census. Mary Ann went to Chicago, has many descendants in America. Eliza never married. Michael went to Chicago and has many descendants living there. Lucy, her death was registered because she died in the county hospital, never married. Delia had died before Lucy. Patrick had died before Lucy. Death's not registered. Nobody seems to know exactly when they died. There is a tombstone in Kilfeera. There were no dates of death on it. So by 1955, Johnnie Mack was living alone in that house where he continued to live for the last quarter century of his life. So just to say a little bit more about historical recognition of the house and its archaeological, architectural, and historical significance. I became aware shortly after Johnnie died in 1981. The first person who said it to me was the late Mary Teresa Hines, who was the librarian here in Kilkee for many years. She said, that house is special. It's the last inhabited mud-built house in West Clare. The late Paddy Nolan drew it to the attention of the council when it was put up for sale in 2001. Pat Flynn from Ennis, some of you from the Shannon Society will remember Pat well. You probably know his daughter Mary Arthur, who now lives here in Kilrush. I brought him to see the house in the 90s. Sonia Shoreman, also from the Shannon Society, took the photos. There's a copy over there of Clare History and Society in which the photograph appeared about 15 years ago. And my own father, Paddy Waldron Sr., was anxious that the house be preserved. Dick Cronin, then the conservation officer in the county council, now retired. I don't think Dick is here tonight, is he? No. He inspected it in 2001, and he recommended that the house be properly surveyed, photographed and recorded, and perhaps even replicated in Bunratty Folk Park as an example of the type of house which made up more than 60% of the dwellings in Clare during the mid-19th century. Many tour groups have come to the house, led by me anyway, over the years. I'm sure some of the other people here may have brought people to look at it. 12 years ago tomorrow, it was a Thursday, it was the 9th of May, and we had 2 busloads as part of the National Famine Commemoration set out from Kilrush to visit sites associated with the famine all over West Clare. And I didn't check now, but I'm sure I mentioned the mud house in Tullaroe when we were drafting the application to the department in Dublin to host the National Famine Commemoration. And we had experts on the famine from all over the world, like Christine Keneally, Sean Sexton, several of the other speakers that came from overseas to talk that week on the bus tour. And I've never seen a reaction to a site like the reaction that the mud house got when we got off the bus. And we came back in here for lunch and a talk about how people could have survived in seaweed during the famine. There's a few people here I know were on that bus tour. And the mud house was all the talk over lunch here as well. And whenever I bring people to see it, they're just intrigued to see that people ask when you tell them about how many people died in the famine. If the population fell by so much, why isn't the country full of ruined houses like the ones we see in the Illustrated London News sketches? Well, the reason is the houses of those who died in the famine were mud houses like Johnnie Mack's house in Tullaroe. And as it has been sinking over the last 44 years back into the landscape, over the last 180 years since the famine, an awful lot more of these mud houses have been lost back into the landscape, leaving little or no trace. So that's why I think it's important to treat the last one we have standing very carefully. I think any such houses are of enormous historical, archaeological, cultural, and emotional interest and significance, and certainly deserve to be studied and, insofar as possible, preserved. I showed you the photographs. Dave is going to talk to us later, and there's just some other links there that you might like to look at on your own afterwards. I will say that another neat outcome of the famine commemoration is people told us, well, it might not be the only mud house in West Clare. Don't see his Killian Murphy here. Killian told us that at one stage he was trying to buy the late Martin Maloney's house in Lishin Crona, near Kilcrona Graveyard. And he went to the bank to look for a loan, and the bank sent out an engineer, and the engineer examined the house, and he said, this house is built of mud. No way can you lend a man money to buy a mud house. Martin Maloney's mud house is still there. I'm not sure whether the bank is still there. And Congela, during that week, visited the Roaches, her cousins in Dunaha, and discovered their old house is also possibly wholly or partly built of mud. But I think Dick Cronin has been to it since, and we're not 100% sure. But when it's plastered over, it's very hard to tell what's behind the plaster and the whitewash. And even when you go through the census returns, one of the questions asked in the 1901 and 1911 census is what materials is the house built of, and one is mud, etc., and the other is stone, etc. And we know that the police constables, who were the enumerators in those days, got the answer wrong. And of course, a lot of houses, as we've seen, and as Dave will tell us, have maybe stone around the doorways and the rest of the walls made of mud. We'll have a few words later from John O'Brien, who's here. The Hastings house, the last original house where Shannon Town stands today in Tullyvarriga, is very definitely a mud house. And you may have seen, nicely juxtaposed in last week's Clare Champion, an article publicising tonight's meeting, and an article about the Hastings farmhouse application for funding or for planning permission to do more restoration work. So I'll leave you to deduce from yourself which side the council is on in both of those articles. So that is really all I want to say. Now we're going to try and get Dave Pollock up online. So if Robbie will get out of my way, I'll move over here for a minute. And we're not sure whether the sound is going to work. So I will add Dave to the stage, and I will add his presentation to the stage. And I will come back over here and go back to StreamYard. And we do have a speaker here. Dave, can you say something? Can you hear me? Dave can hear me, and he's talking away, but we can't hear him. So what else can I do? Let me see, can I put the YouTube on here? Give me 1 minute. Where am I going? Oops. I'm not sure what the sound coming out of this is. And if not, we're going to have to read Dave's talk for him. So this is going out live on YouTube. Okay, I think this is going to work, Dave. Yeah. No, still not hearing you, Dave. Okay, maybe you're probably going to have to put up with me, whatever's gone wrong with the technology. First time I tried this, I'm going to use that. Dave has now given me a thumbs up, and I will. Sorry? No, I don't think anybody is. He's still talking away, but for whatever reason, the speaker isn't picking up whatever Dave is saying. So Dave is listening to us. He says he's very sorry he can't get to the talks this evening. He asked if someone could read a few words, so unfortunately I have to read it. He's put these words together on the archaeological background to the work done and the work to be finished. This is the photo I showed you already, taken by Johnny's, obviously his great niece's husband, I think is the picture, because he's in it in 1978. When it had a roof and before it was engulfed in jungle. You can see there was a lot of grass growing out of the thatch even in those days. You can't tell from the picture that the wall you're looking at is largely made of mud with a skim of concrete on the end wall to the right. In the photo, both are hidden by whitewash or white paint. Now, Dave, you're going to have to move the slide forward for me if you can hear me. You're doing something. There we go. Amazing the miracles of modern technology. Slide 2. By contrast, this is, excuse my pronunciation, Ait Ben Hadou on the edge of the Sahara Desert in Morocco. No whitewash needed here to keep the rain off. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site with traditional rectangular turreted buildings standing 4 stories high, built of mud. Not whitewashed. Dave went to see it last year on holidays. Next slide, please, Dave. Following the Moroccan earthquake in 2023, part of it had fallen down, and Dave could see how the high-rises were built. Stage 1 was stone, clay bonded, onto which was added stage 2, mud or clay cast and shuttering, and onto this was stage 3, a thinner wall of mud brick, clay bonded. These were the homes of wealthy 18th and 19th century merchants on a major caravan route in a relatively dry part of the world. Next slide. 2,500 kilometers from Ait Ben Hadou, as the swallow flies, in a damper part of the world, we have Johnnie Mack's Cross. This is on a major camper van route, the Wild Atlantic Way. Dave had the pleasure of visiting last month to clear the worst of the jungle from the last old building standing by the crossroads. We must thank Joe Lenan and his team from the council for doing the hard graft. I hope John will pass on the thanks to them. There's been no earthquake damage at Johnnie Mack's Cross, but the roof has collapsed and some of the walling has fallen since the place was last occupied 44 years ago. In the photograph, the nearest part of the building, with the ladder against it here, is a late add-on with mortared stone walls, but the rest is older, and like its Moroccan cousin, is a mixture of mud and clay-bonded stone, but no mud brick. Next slide, please. This is a close-up of the far end by the crossroads. This is the old mud wall with the original stone lintel overhead and the sides rebuilt and tidied up with more recent mortared stonework. We don't know the age of the building, but as I said myself, it is shown on the earliest detailed map, the 6-inch to the mile ordnance survey map of about 1840. In those days, this was a key junction rather than a crossroad. Mud buildings have a long and noble record in these northern parts that were generally built outside the town and not higher than 1 story. Next slide. The earliest mud building Dave has come across was in Scotland at the Northumbrian monastery of Whitthorne in southern Scotland. This was Dave's reconstruction. All we had left on site was the stone footing, clay bonded, and the depth of clay silt with bits of fart clay and coloured window glass. This had been an 8th century burial chapel at the end of a wooden church. It was damaged by fire when the church burned down in the 9th century. It had stained glass windows, making it a very prestigious building. Next slide. This is Dave's drawing of Johnnie Mack's house. It's nowhere near as old. In this simplified sketch, the doorway we were looking at is numbered 03 and 04. The mud wall is half the length of the present cell. The yellow there is mud, with the door in the middle. Oops. I didn't do that, did I? There we go. The door in the middle. I've lost my place in the notes now. And a hollow for a window, 02 beside it. There's the hollow for the window. A thick coat of concrete, 05, the white on the end, has been stuck on the end at the crossroads sometime in the 20th century. But there's still mud inside the concrete. Much earlier, the building seems to have been extended away from the crossroads down this way, with clay bonded stonework number 12, which has been topped with coarse of mud number 14. So maybe they ran out of stone, or maybe they were raising the roof at a later stage or something and put mud on top of the stone wall even. The mud walling was generally built a foot at a time to allow the material to set. This building was then extended with mortared stonework, number 17 in the sketch, the extension on the eastern end. Looking at the join between the mud wall 01 up in the western end and the clay bonded 012, this junction here, which is here near where the measuring stick is in the map. We're on to the next. In the middle of this picture with the window cavity to the right, there's our window cavity. It really looks as though the stonework is an extension rather than part of a longer original building. The situation isn't quite so clear on the other side of the house. On the sunny side, this is the same sketch but looked at from the southern side. Here, the late build 17, the stone at the eastern end, still stands out as something late, as does the concrete skin 05, which wraps around onto the front of the house that is back to the road. Creeping along the side wall, past the first window here, nothing before the front door, the main door. The concrete doesn't stop against a mud wall face though, but against clay bonded stone 010, the brownie stuff, with a capping of mud again on top on the southern side of the house. This looks so similar to the outside of the wall further east, 12 and 14, that the two may have been built at once. Unfortunately, the joint between the two has formed due to jungle rather than earthquake. The jungle is our major enemy on this job, which isn't over yet. The worst of the overgrowth has been hacked and sawn from the building, except for a mature sycamore which will remain in the middle room. We'll concentrate on the main room, exposing the floor where we can. The chimney blast has fallen, and it may be too dangerous to work within the old fireplace against wall number 15. This side, I think. You saw that fireplace with a wonderful either bog oak or driftwood mantle over it, which mightn't have been as clear in the photographs, but it's very clear if you look at it today. The south door here is unusable for access due to damage from a pair of decorative plants which have gone bananas since the building was lived. So there's our two decorative plants which have gone bananas. This photo shows the door during jungle clearance with windows to either side. Our major problem inside the building is going to be roots. A bit like icebergs, jungles have a lot of themselves hidden below the surface. And finally, before midsummer, we will have an accurate three-dimensional laser survey of what remains of Johnnie Mack's house. To get ready for the survey, we need to trim the ivy and the briars and take out the collapsed patch in the main room closest to the crossroads, and from a few places of interest where we can get through or between the roots. Dave is looking for volunteers with free time during the week starting Monday the 19th of May. He says we may get it done in 4 days or it may run to 5. If you're interested in helping, we'd like to hear from you. So sorry that we couldn't hear that in Dave's voice. Thank you very much for the words, Dave, and for doing the slides, and I hope you can hear us. So next is John O'Brien going to say a few words to us about the farmhouse. Let me see if I can find John's PowerPoint here. Show beginning, and I need to share this. So I need to go back to StreamYard and exit that and present and share screen. Window. Simply Kilkee. Got the right window. I didn't see that. I think that was the right window. That was the wrong one. One second. PowerPoint slide. Sorry, that was the one. Right. Sometimes that thing won't go away, so we just move it over there. You can use the arrow keys there. And you need a microphone. So I think those of you watching on YouTube can see John's presentation. And take Dave up. Okay, I think we're ready to go.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Angela, thank you very much for the invitation to say a few words here tonight, even that it's off your topic, but in a way it's connected. Because in Shannon we have the remains of a mud house, the last link to the old landscape of Shannon before the town was built. And on the screen at the moment, we have some photographs taken late 60s, in fact, it says circa 1970 there, by Shannon Development. And the house was lived in up to about that time. So we have a few very interesting pictures inside of the roof, the fireplace, and the outside. It's a substantial house. But in the early 1970s, it was vandalized and the thatched roof was set alight and it was abandoned. Thankfully, Shannon Development did not bulldoze it like they did another house that was vandalized. So the vegetation took over. The house was more or less rediscovered in 2011, 2012. Now we might, oh yes. So a group got together, Dúchas na Sionna, they go by the name of, group of volunteers, unveiled the house, rescued, kind of revealed the house again. And obviously cob or mud is fine if it's roofed and kept dry and maintained, but if the water, it shrinks down into the ground and goes back to where it came from. So that process was well underway at that time. So there was conservation work done at the time, basically maintaining what was there, patching it up and capping it with concrete. In the fullness of time, that was proven not to be a long-term viable way of preserving the site. So our group has been on the go since 2012. At that time and up to recently, the site was owned by Clare County Council. But recently, Clare County Council have leased the site to our group, which has become a company limited by guarantee. So there's a legal basis, sound basis there. We have a 21-year lease, and we are undertaking the rebuilding of the house, the reconstitution of the house, I guess, using the materials from which it was made originally, which commonly known as mud, but really, when you think about it, it's subsoil. It's an earthen building, and in very recent times, having got the lease and having got a supervising engineer, Chris Southgate, and other specialists, we carried out workshops to test the material out of the ground and decide where the house is. Now, the house, for anyone who doesn't know where it is, and most of you won't, I'm sure, is between the crematorium and the graveyard. There's a strip of ground that goes right down to the river there, and that's where the ruin is. So it's in a site, a cutaway part of a hill. And we got the material in the existing walls tested in Trinity College. We dug up a bit of the field next 20 yards away. It's exactly the same material with no additions. We reckon that the house was made of all the material that was available absolutely beside the house. And we did a test workshop in August, and we did more in October, November. So the engineer suggests that the most viable and efficient way to rebuild the house is using rammed earth. Now, other people might say we should be using cob. Cob is earth, the same earth mixed with water. And then you let it dry out. You don't use any shuttering. Our engineer reckons that the best way for us to go forward is to put up shuttering, do it 1 foot at a time, and let it solidify and then move up again. And this has been proven to actually work. In Heritage Week Day, Sunday, last August, in an hour, they built a section of a wall. They took off the shuttering, and it stayed there. If you went down now, you could hop a hammer off it. And all it is a subsoil from beside the house. So that's the plan. That's another slide of what was done in October, November in the workshops. There's a section of wall that they've just unveiled. That's about a 2.5 foot thick section. It's a test piece, about that width. It's an external wall. They just did it as a test. It hasn't been that well protected from the rain during the winter, unfortunately, because we had storms and various things. So a lot of water has got at it, but it's still there intact. Not at all as good as the first piece they did, which was a little bit better protected from the rain. So what they tell us is that as long as it's protected from the top by a roof, and on the sides by whitewash, this house will last longer than most of the concrete houses recently built in Shannon. It was built about 1820, thereabouts maybe. It would still be perfect if it hadn't been damaged. That's our theory. And that's our vision for the future. That's a composite of a picture taken by Shannon Development, and the barn at right angles to it is slightly enhanced, shall we say, photographically or on Photoshop. But that's roughly what we hope it will look like in a year and a half's time, perhaps. And it will be a community facility for heritage, for meetings, for little exhibitions and things like that. And so that's basically it. I don't want to talk about the history of it at all. It's of no relevance really tonight. We have produced a little brochure, which I have copies of. I'm not quite sure if I have enough for everyone in the audience, because it's a very big audience, which is very gratifying. Thank you very much.
Hello again. We've had three great speakers, but part of our mission tonight is to speak to the people who knew Johnnie, who have any stories about Johnnie, so it's recorded along with all this information. So I'm opening up the floor. I'm giving the microphone to Paul, and if there's anybody who knew Johnnie or his family or their relatives or have stories, we would love to hear from you, please.
And the microphone is only for those watching on YouTube. You still have to speak up so those in the room can hear you.
Thank you.
My name is David Scanlon. I live just over the road from Johnnie Mack's on the eastern side. I have a family. We use that cross maybe 20 times a day. Our children can't go to school through the fields now that the school is gone. So they have to be taken, our grandchildren. Okay? I drive out there with a loader and tractor, turning to the right, virtually impossible. I witnessed the accident 3 weeks ago, where 2 helicopters had to come and take the injured people. So you're all very comfortable sitting in here talking about mud houses, but we live there. There's only 2-3 families. We use the cross at least 20 times a day. We go out there. There's somebody going up the road from the creeks or the moorings or wherever, heading for the 19th hole. We have to live with that. The road has been widened, and as a result of the widening, the traffic has got faster. It's 18 inches wider. The house has moved out onto the road. Unless you're a donkey, you can see that walking down. The gable of the house is now outside in the road. So I want the council to do something. We've already written to them. They've told us they're going to look into it, but it's not enough. Somebody is going to get killed there. You know, I appreciate the best photograph I saw there tonight was 1978 when Johnnie was standing outside the door. The most that passed that door that day was a couple of donkey carts and maybe 1 or 2 Morris miners. But now they're doing 16, 70 kilometers an hour. We are trying to nose our way out there. It's virtually impossible. So I want you to take that into consideration. Okay? Thank you very much.
It's a very valid point. I think everyone locally agrees with you. But they have made the decisions. They have and are doing something about it. And by the end of the year, it should all be sorted. But thank you for your comments. They're gratefully received. So if there isn't any words for people about, oh, we have some here.
There was 20 odd houses built in Corbally in Cusheen in the 1820s from there on, and single room, two room, single room kitchen, with the outer layer of stone and the inner layer of mud, and they stayed there for 100 odd years until a carpenter in Cusheen named Patsy Hawk, about 1920, I'd say 2030, he stepped into the next sections a bit away for them and built the inner layer again with stone and used the mud as an insulation. And those houses are still there today, even though they have changed hands and they're extended and modernized. And you have what comes on the roof and everything else. But those houses, you know, like when he built the inner layer, it was whitewashed, and later it was plastered, and later heralded and modernized. But that insulation, that mud insulation, is still there. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to open up the floor to anybody who has any questions for Paddy or John.
How many more houses are, I think what's coming, but some
Paul.
Can you wait for the microphone?
I don't really need it. How many?
No, you do.
I think the listing online needs. I think the listing online needs.
Oh, offline, okay, fair enough. I'm just wondering how many of these cob houses, these houses made of clay or clay, there are maybe in Clare still. I know I met a man on the market many years ago in Ennis, selling whatever he was selling, about 10 or 15 years ago. He told me he lived in such a house. I actually didn't kind of like believe him until one day, about 10 years ago, I came across Johnnie Mack's house by sheer chance on my way to Queren, to Pure Camp. And I've stopped there a few times taking photographs, particularly the beautiful arched lintel above the fireplace. And I thought my mother was born in a house, a finer house in the sense, pure all stone and a thatched house. And it attracted my attention. I've stopped there, almost like call it commune there. It's a place where people live, it's out of the earth. How many of them maybe is still, is it even known, like you say, because if they're in good order, you can't see underneath the whitewash. Thank you. By the way, as far as road safety, since years, I appreciate there's particular issues to do with the particular position of that house there. But people are driving, we're driving too fast anyway, even when the road is a good road. And we're killing people because of it and injuring people. And please, we all need to slow down. We're driving as if we're in a rally. Too many of us. It's dangerous. Thank you.
Right, any more questions? If we haven't any more questions, I'd like to pass over to Congella Maguire, who'd like to give a vote of thanksgiving. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you all for coming here tonight and for all the contributions from the floor and for your. Sorry. So I'd like to thank you all for coming here tonight and from your contributions from the floor and your interest in the topic. It's a fascinating topic. As Dave Pollock said, you know, the back to do further survey work in the building on the 19th of this month, and he would certainly welcome people to come and volunteer if you want with helping with the excavation at that time. I'd like to thank our speakers, and Paddy put an awful lot of work into tonight. You can see the depth of the genealogy and his all the information we got about the inhabitants of the house and the whole story of immigration and the famine. It's a fascinating story in itself. To Robbie, who engineered tonight and set this meeting up, to Robbie, and the local community down in Quern, people have been involved in helping already, coming along, talking to Dave Pollock, helping with equipment and etc. and assisting there. Also, I'd like to thank the Heritage Council for funding this work, and also Clare County Council who are funding this work. But you know, we're in the start of a journey. We have to see what the next steps are, and they'll be taken very carefully. But sightlines will be put in place, and that junction will be made safe by John and in the West Clare Municipal District. I'd also like to thank the West Clare Municipal District, John and Ellen and Joe Linan, and the people, the workers who have come and worked with Dave as well. So thanks to that. So if any of you, we'd like to hear more stories. We'd like to record people who might have stories about the house. And so we'd be very anxious that, you know, we talk to some local people that we've been already talking to. So we'd like to continue that conversation as well. So again, thank you all for coming, and we must thank the West Clare Heritage and History Society and Robbie and John, and also the Kilrussian District Historical Society, of course, and thanks to Paddy for bringing the attention of this house to Clare County Council and for initiating all that's happening at the moment. So thanks very much, everybody, and thanks for your coming along tonight. And I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just the contact details for the volunteering for
Dave Pollock. Angela is the go-between for Dave, so I think you talk to her. That's probably the best thing to do.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I'm Liz. I emailed you.
Oh, it's the coffee from America and Milton or something.
That's great.
Glad you made it.
I want to say thank you first of all, and I want you to know that I got information about this evening from a big fan of yours in the UK, who is big into genealogy. She sent an email to me. Can we go down and say it's today? I'm so delighted. You're a big fan. We're doing a local history course in UL online, and we've got friends in Australia, America.
And who's my fan in England?
Doing it. She's her name's married Anya. She's originally from West Cork, I think. And we came there emigrated over grandparents from West Cork.
Are they on you? Take any bells on it?
No, just to know that you're very popular and please give us information about you. So I took the right person from here, letting you know this sunshine. So
Where did you come from?
I'm from the Scanner. I'm doing work on the family workhouse in the Scanner. So
And your own name?
Bridget Nagel.
Richard Nagle.
I just want to say thank you, and you're a big fan base all over the world in the Bay Area of your book is one of the books. So thank you for this night, and thank you for all the work you're doing. And keep it kind of.
How are you?
So many thanks.
Lovely to meet you. What's going on YouTube here? The whole thing crashed just as Angela was wrapping up. Right? I think it's still recording. Silence to YouTube.
You've a recording done for YouTube that people can watch back.
Yeah. Angela was listening through YouTube and she said, but thank you for working perfectly. She started to talk.
So can you give us a few more people?
It's John Mack, not how much it goes to.
Yeah, because then
I was surprised because Angela told me this way. There he goes. Hello. It's still recording. I can't get into stuff. I want to ask John a question.
I can't see anybody covered up this side. Let the right people.
photograph of the Jesuit arms. That's something that really drew me away. So I've seen glass straight across. It's a lot like a lintel type. I know the name.
West of Kilkee,
Oh yeah.
road. Right, I suppose it is. Tullaroe Bay. 3 miles of that road. And there's half walls through the side of the road with the same sort of arched road.
It is all those two things. The one in across is quite pale in colour.
Yeah, I'm not sure what sort of temper it is.
It's intriguing the curve on it.
Curve.
And the curve, is it that it's been tuned down? The curve. Or is it